Imagine the look on those fake cops' faces when my wife, security commander at the naval base, pulled out her credentials and asked, "What exactly are you gentlemen doing here?" Their faces turned ghost white. See, the HOA wanted to evict us over a 100-year-old oak tree in our backyard. Perfect. We'd show them what happens when you mess with the wrong family. If you're watching this video from Texas, comment, "Don't mess with military folks" below. Now let me tell you the story of how our nightmare HOA tried to intimidate a veteran family and the bitter consequences they faced. My name's Ethan Blackwell. I served 12 years in the Marine Corps before retiring to civilian life as a structural engineer. My wife, Amanda, stayed active in the Navy. Just before we moved in, she'd been promoted to lieutenant commander and appointed as security chief at the nearby naval base. We'd spent over a decade bouncing from base to base. Now finally, after 15 years of service relocations, we were ready to plant roots for ourselves and for our 10-year-old son, Tyler. The house we found was perfect. A beautiful colonial with a sprawling backyard and a majestic oak tree that had stood there longer than the neighborhood itself. Tyler ran circles around it during the showing. We imagined tree houses, tire swings, stability, everything we never had time to give him before. The neighborhood, gated, upscale, manicured lawns, coordinated mailboxes, neat little rules. Looking back now, that should have been our first red flag. In our excitement, we signed the HOA agreement without reading every line. A mistake, one that would soon come back to haunt us. We'd faced insurgents. We'd navigated the Pentagon's maze of red tape. But nothing prepared us for the suburban warfare we were about to face. 3 days after we moved in, still surrounded by cardboard boxes and chaos, the doorbell rang. Standing there with a forced smile and a gift basket was Victoria Hamilton. She looked like a political candidate. Tailored navy blue pantsuit, silver blonde bob, and a smile that never quite touched her eyes. "Welcome to Oak Ridge Estates," she said. She handed us the basket, local coupons, and a laminated copy of the HOA guidelines. "I wanted to personally welcome you and ensure you understand our community standards." Then her eyes drifted past me, through the hallway, to the oak tree visible from our backyard. Her smile tightened. "Most homeowners in our community prefer a more manicured appearance," she said smoothly. "You might consider having that tree removed to better align with our aesthetic standards." My spine stiffened, same way it did in the Corps when a commanding officer gave an order that crossed the line. "The oak stays," I said firmly. Victoria's pleasant smile faltered for a moment. Something cold and calculated flickered in her eyes. Then she replied, "Well, we'll see. The Homeowners Association takes our standards very seriously." As she walked away, Amanda, standing in the hallway, caught my eye. Her expression was unreadable, but I could tell something was off. Amanda spent years in naval intelligence before security command. She can read people better than anyone I've ever met. She leaned in and whispered, "We've got a problem. That woman isn't just enforcing rules, she's establishing dominance." The following weekend was the community welcome BBQ. We showed up, tried to be friendly. Most folks were warm, especially Daniel Foster, a law professor who lived 2 doors down. As he shook my hand, he leaned in and said, "Don't let Victoria intimidate you. She runs this place like her personal kingdom, ever since her husband died." We soon saw what he meant. People quieted down when Victoria walked past. They listened to her like she was royalty. And near the end of the event, she tapped her wine glass and made an announcement. "And let's all help the new neighbors, the Blackwells, understand the importance of our community standards. Their yard needs a bit of work to meet expectations." Smiling public humiliation, dressed in pearls and passive aggression. Several neighbors looked down at their plates, clearly uncomfortable. I was about to speak up, but Amanda touched my arm. "Not here," she murmured. Always the strategist. That night, she pulled out a notebook and began scribbling. "What's that?" I asked. "Our battle plan. Victoria just declared war. Tomorrow we read every word of that HOA agreement. We find our allies, we figure out our legal position." And so it began. 2 weeks after move-in, the first formal HOA notice arrived. Violation: grass length exceeding regulation by 0.25 inches. Fine: $50. I had mowed the lawn 2 days before. I walked outside. The lawn was immaculate. This wasn't about grass. This was about control. Then came another notice. Garbage bins left visible from the street 4 minutes past the collection window. Another $50 next. Tyler's basketball hoop visible from the street, even though it was tucked against the garage. Fine after fine. Week after week, they were trying to bleed us out. Amanda, ever the officer, had turned our dining room into an operations center. Legal docs, city ordinances, HOA bylaws spread out in every direction. They're exploiting vague language in the covenant, she said, flipping through the binder. Look at this. Aesthetic uniformity shall be maintained at the discretion of the board. They can cite anything as a violation, but they were overplaying their hand. Some of the fines contradicted city code, which supersedes HOA rules. Daniel became a key ally. He filled us in over coffee. Victoria's husband was Colonel Hamilton. He kept things fair. Since he passed, well, this HOA has become her domain. Then he added something else, quietly. She's particularly close with Walter Brooks, former cop. He handles her enforcement. Walter. Black SUV, tinted windows, parked across our house at odd hours. Camera lens sticking out the window, snapping photos. He claimed to be documenting violations, but never said which ones. Tyler started asking if he could play only in the backyard. The man in the black car scares me. One night, Nancy Sullivan, an HOA board member, came to deliver yet another notice, but this time she hesitated. "I'm sorry about all this," she whispered. "It's never been this bad before. Not even with the Parkers last year." Then she caught herself. Eyes widened. She turned and left without another word. That night, Amanda installed security cameras. Base grade, high-resolution surveillance. "We need documentation," she said, adjusting the final camera to face our driveway. "Everything they do, every claim they make, we need evidence." Then she paused. Her voice turned serious. "Ethan, this goes deeper than just HOA pettiness. They're not trying to fine us. They're trying to drive us out. And I want to know why." The next HOA meeting confirmed it. Victoria presided from a raised platform flanked by Walter and the rest of her board. The vibe: less community potluck, more court-martial. I stood and calmly outlined every inconsistent violation we'd received. The contradictions, the selective enforcement. Before I could finish, Victoria cut me off. "The Blackwells have installed unauthorized plantings in their front beds," she announced. Boom. Walter projected surveillance photos of Amanda's lavender bushes on the screen behind her. That's when I realized they weren't just watching us. They were building a case, and they were about to find out they'd picked the wrong family to mess with. Melissa Parker had moved out of our neighborhood last year, crossing the highway into a smaller subdivision after selling her home here, at a significant loss. Daniel had quietly slipped us her new address and phone number with a warning. "Just don't mention I sent you." Victoria has a long memory for what she calls disloyalty. When Amanda and I met Melissa, she was visibly anxious, a woman in her mid-40s with a nervous energy that put us on edge. She was reluctant to talk until I mentioned the oak tree. Her eyes changed instantly. "They tried to make us cut ours down too," she said, motioning for us to come inside her modest home. "They said it violated some obscure height rule. We tried to fight it, but the fines kept climbing, $2,500 a month by the end." Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out a folder of paperwork. "My husband lost his job during COVID. We couldn't keep up, and we couldn't keep fighting." The story got darker from there. Victoria had claimed their heritage oak violated a line of sight restriction buried deep in the HOA bylaws, something no one had enforced before. But after the Parkers sold, Melissa finally learned the real reason. A developer had bought several parcels on the edge of the neighborhood, she said bitterly. The only access point was through the green belt behind our old home. The trees, including ours, stood in the way. 3 months after they moved out, the area was rezoned. The trees came down. Construction started almost immediately. And I heard Victoria got a consulting fee from the developer. That was the threat Amanda needed. Using her military contacts, she accessed public records that would have taken civilians weeks. One name popped immediately. Councilman Gregory Matthews, she said, spreading the documents across our dining table late that night. He's on the zoning commission that approved the reclassification behind the Parkers' home. He's also listed as a silent investor in Pinnacle Development Group. She tapped a second sheet. And here, Victoria Hamilton, registered as a special consultant for Pinnacle, paid quarterly. The picture was forming fast. This wasn't about HOA rules. Victoria was systematically targeting homeowners whose properties interfered with a much larger development plan. Our oak, like the Parkers, was in the way. And there's more, Amanda added grimly. The HOA's financial records, Daniel, helped me access them, show large payments to legal consultants. No details, no firm names, just gone. I'm betting that money's either going to Victoria or being used to fund this harassment campaign. The next day, I took time off work to visit Eleanor Turner, an elderly neighbor who'd lived here since the subdivision's founding. Her home was filled with memorabilia, old blueprints, and HOA newsletters dating back decades. The oaks were here long before the houses, she said, showing me an original 1960s survey map. They were specifically protected in the original development plan. There's even a clause in the founding HOA covenant, still binding, that names them as protected community assets. With that foundation, our case had teeth. Then Amanda uncovered the wild card, Walter Brooks, before joining the HOA. Walter had been forced into early retirement from the police department under suspicion of evidence falsification. He wasn't just a bitter ex-cop. He was a man with a proven record of misconduct. That afternoon, I saw him again, parked down the street in his dented truck, peering through binoculars at our home. Not even trying to be subtle, I walked straight, up to his driver's side window. "Looking for violations today, Walter?" I asked calmly. He scrambled to lower the binoculars, then sneered. "Just doing my job, Blackwell. Someone's got to uphold standards around here." He started his engine. "You military types always think the rules don't apply to you. Victoria's not going to let your kind ruin this neighborhood's value. You should start packing now. Save yourself the trouble." That night, Amanda came home visibly rattled. She waited until Tyler was asleep before speaking. "I was at the clubhouse copying financial records. Thought I was alone. Then Victoria and Walter came in." She pulled out her phone and hit play. Victoria's voice crackled through the speaker. "Matthews says the zoning commission meets next month. We need those properties cleared by then, especially the Blackwells. That oak has to go one way or another." Walter's reply was gruff. "The legal route's taking too long. Brooks thinks I can speed things up." Then Victoria's voice again, low, cold, calculated. "Do what you need to do. Just make sure it can't be traced back to us or the association. I've worked too hard to let some military family with their precious tree derail everything." The audio ended. Amanda and I sat there in silence. This was no longer HOA harassment. This was criminal conspiracy. The next morning, we received a certified letter. Emergency HOA meeting scheduled. Agenda, legal action against the Blackwell residents, including potential eviction. It was war now. They're trying to force a confrontation before you can expose them, Daniel said when we called in a panic. "But if you reveal what you've learned at that meeting, publicly, Victoria's control could collapse." We had 3 days to prepare. The HOA scheduled the meeting for 7 p.m. on a Thursday, strategically inconvenient for most working families. Amanda took the day off. I worked remotely, finalizing documentation. Despite Daniel's urging, we didn't hire a lawyer. "They'll expect us to bring counsel," Amanda said. "But they won't expect us to be more prepared than their own attorney." Victoria brought in Ryan Harrison, a slick HOA litigator known for weaponizing bylaws. He'd forced out dozens of homeowners before us. What he didn't know was that Amanda had studied every case he'd argued and knew exactly where he overstepped. That night, the community clubhouse was packed. More neighbors had shown up than usual, likely curious after months of tension. Victoria and the board sat elevated at the head table, smug and composed. Ryan Harrison was right beside them. Expensive suit, perfect hair, polished documents. We sat front row, calm, focused. Victoria opened abruptly. "This session addresses ongoing violations at the Blackwell residence," she said coldly. "Due to repeated infractions, the board has authorized legal proceedings." She nodded to Harrison. He stood and passed around folders. "These homeowners have repeatedly ignored community standards," he began, "including unauthorized landscaping, failure to maintain property standards, and, most serious of all, refusal to remove a hazardous oak tree." He projected photos, angled to make our property look unkempt, with red circles and ominous arrows. "The tree poses a direct safety risk," he continued, producing a report. "An independent arborist confirms structural weakness. The HOA demands immediate removal. Daily fines of $1,000 will be imposed until compliance." Then it was our turn. I stood and thanked the board, then held up the arborist report. "Before I respond, I'd like to verify the credentials of the arborist who authored this." Harrison smirked. "Martin Consulting, fully licensed, beyond question." I nodded. "Interesting, because Martin Consulting was dissolved 18 months ago." I projected the official dissolution record. Gasps echoed. Even some board members shifted uncomfortably. "This report is fraudulent," I said flatly, "which means introducing it as evidence constitutes legal fraud." Amanda stepped up beside me, distributing our own packets. "Furthermore," she added, "the original HOA covenant designates all heritage oaks as protected community assets. That clause has never been superseded." Eleanor's maps and notes appeared on screen. For the next 20 minutes, we dismantled every accusation, photographic evidence, county ordinances, original legal protections, and finally the bombshell. Amanda held up the financial disclosure. Victoria Hamilton, listed as a consultant to Pinnacle Development Group, the same company pushing to rezone green space behind our homes. Councilman Gregory Matthews, same deal. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Then Amanda displayed the HOA's financials. Over $60,000 in legal consulting fees, paid during months with no litigation, aligned with construction milestones. Victoria snapped. "This is absurd," she shouted. "These military people think they're above the rules." She turned to Harrison, expecting rescue. But the lawyer was sweating, flipping pages, clearly blindsided. He wasn't the only one. Walter cornered Victoria near the exit, their heated whispers just audible from where I stood gathering our materials. "This is getting out of control," he hissed. "They've got too much. We need to move to Plan B before they find the zoning applications." Victoria's response chilled me. "Take care of it tomorrow, I don't care how. Just make them understand they're not welcome here anymore." Their expressions as they looked our way contained something more dangerous than mere annoyance. There was desperation now. And desperation often led to reckless actions. Daniel approached us as we headed to our car, his expression grave. "You've rattled them, and that's dangerous," he warned. "Victoria doesn't lose gracefully. Watch yourselves." Amanda nodded, her military training evident in her alert posture and scanning gaze. "We're well aware," she replied. "The cameras are running 24/7 and I've added motion sensors. They won't catch us unprepared." What none of us realized then was just how far Victoria and Walter were willing to go, and how soon they would make their desperate move. 2 days after the hearing, I had to attend an overnight engineering conference in Atlanta. I'd been reluctant to leave given the escalating situation, but Amanda insisted. "We can't put our lives on hold because of their intimidation tactics," she reasoned. "Besides, I'm perfectly capable of handling any situation that arises." As a military security commander, she certainly was, but neither of us anticipated what form Victoria's Plan B would take. According to what Amanda told me later, it was around 8:30 in the evening when the doorbell rang. Tyler was already in bed, and Amanda was reviewing security protocols for an upcoming base inspection. Through the doorbell camera, She saw two men in police uniforms standing on our porch, looking official and serious. But something immediately triggered her professional suspicion. The uniforms looked correct at first glance, but the badges didn't catch the porch light quite right. Their stances lacked the practiced posture of real officers. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Brendan Miller, and this is Officer Scott Daniels with the County Sheriff's Department," the taller one announced when she opened the door, keeping the security chain engaged. He held up what appeared to be a badge and ID but moved them too quickly for proper verification. "We have an inspection and potential eviction order for this property related to multiple HOA violations and safety concerns." The second man held up an official-looking document with county letterhead. Amanda maintained her composure, though she immediately recognized the ploy for what it was. "May I see that documentation more carefully, please?" she asked politely. Brendan hesitated, then passed the paper through the partially opened door. Amanda's trained eye instantly spotted the irregularities. The county seal was slightly blurred. The judge's signature didn't match documents from our hearing. And most damning, jurisdiction was misspelled in the header. "This seems unusual for a routine HOA matter," she commented, stalling while covertly texting her colleague, Officer Tiffany Wells, at the actual sheriff's department. "I'd like to verify this with the department before proceeding. What did you say your badge numbers were again?" "Both." Men shifted uncomfortably, exchanging quick glances. "Ma'am, we're just doing our job," the second man said with forced authority. "A rancher called the Direog. We need to inspect the property, particularly the oak tree that's been deemed hazardous." Amanda heard Tyler's bedroom door creak open upstairs. The unfamiliar voices had woken him. "Mom? What's happening?" He called down, his voice small and frightened. "Everything's fine, honey," Amanda replied calmly. "Just some confusion with some gentlemen at the door. Go back to bed, please." She turned back to the so-called officers. "I'm going to need to see your badges again," she said, firmer now. "And I'll need to call your supervisor to confirm this unusual nighttime enforcement of a civil matter." The men became visibly agitated. "Ma'am, refusing to comply with law enforcement is a serious offense," the first one said, his hand drifting toward his holster in a clear attempt at intimidation. That was the moment Amanda ended the charade. She pulled out her Naval Security Commander identification and held it up to the door. "Gentlemen, I am Lieutenant Colonel Amanda Blackwell, Security Commander at Naval Station Norfolk. I believe you're impersonating police officers, which is a federal offense. My colleague at the Sheriff's Department is en route to verify your credentials. I suggest you start explaining yourselves." The transformation was immediate and somewhat pathetic. The false confidence drained from their faces, replaced by genuine fear. The second man, Scott, actually took a step back. "Look, we didn't know," he stammered. "We were just hired to—" Brendan cut him off with a sharp look. "We have legitimate business here," he insisted, though his voice had lost all authoritative edge. "We were contracted by the HOA, by Walter Brooks specifically," Amanda interrupted, watching their expressions confirm her suspicion, "to intimidate my family with false legal documents while my husband is conveniently out of town." She pulled out her phone, which had been recording the entire interaction. "Every word of this conversation is being documented, as is your presence on my property under false pretenses. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain who you really are before I place you under citizen's arrest for impersonating law enforcement." Their facade crumbled completely. "It was just supposed to be a scare tactic," Scott blurted out. "Brooks said you'd back down if official-looking cops showed up with eviction paperwork. We weren't supposed to actually do anything." Brendan tried to regain composure. "We're private investigators," he said, but Amanda doubted. Even that was true. "Brooks hired us to deliver the notice and take photos of the tree, that's all." The wail of approaching sirens ended the conversation. Officer Tiffany Wells arrived with 2 patrol cars, having responded to Amanda's text with appropriate urgency. I later saw the body camera footage from that night. The look of absolute shock on Brendan and Scott's faces as they were handcuffed and read their rights was something I wish I'd witnessed in person. As they were placed in separate patrol cars, Scott broke down completely. He admitted they were former security guards who occasionally did special jobs for Walter when he needed to intimidate people. He also confirmed Walter specifically timed the stunt for when I would be away, assuming Amanda would be easier to scare, as just a military wife. That miscalculation would prove to be Walter and Victoria's undoing. While Tiffany processed the fake officers, Amanda called me in Atlanta, and then immediately contacted her commanding officer to report the incident. By morning, what had started as a neighborhood HOA dispute had escalated into potential federal charges: conspiracy, impersonation of law enforcement, attempted intimidation, and fraud. As I drove home the next morning, Amanda's words over the phone replayed in my mind. "They've crossed the line from harassment to criminal activity. Now we stop playing defense and start the counterattack." When I walked in, our quiet suburban house had been transformed into what Amanda jokingly dubbed Operation HOA Freedom. The dining room table had disappeared beneath maps, legal documents, timelines, and strategy plans. Amanda, still in her Naval uniform after reporting the incident to her superiors, was coordinating with Tiffany Wells and Daniel Foster. Tyler was staying with friends, a precaution we both agreed was necessary until the situation was resolved. Brendan and Scott rolled over completely, Tiffany explained as I set down my overnight bag. They gave signed statements confirming Walter hired them to intimidate your family using fake police credentials and phony court documents. She shook her head. We executed a search warrant on Walter's home this morning. Found templates for the fake documents plus notes on your schedules and camera positions. This goes way beyond typical HOA overreach. We're looking at multiple felonies. Amanda had already called in her military connections. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service is involved now, she explained. Attempting to intimidate a military officer by impersonating law enforcement violates federal statutes. NCIS is especially concerned about the surveillance Walter conducted. He may have compromised military security. Her voice was resolute. She was no longer just a frustrated homeowner. She was a security commander handling a breach of protocol. Victoria and Walter didn't just pick the wrong family to harass, she said. They created a national security concern. Daniel brought his own ammunition to the counteroffensive. I've been documenting Victoria's HOA violations for years, he said, spreading meticulous folders across the table. Selective enforcement, procedural violations, financial irregularities. I kept records, just waiting for someone brave enough to challenge her. He smiled grimly. I just didn't expect it would involve fake cops and federal charges. Tyler returned home relieved to find our house now regularly patrolled by actual police officers as part of the ongoing investigation. But Victoria wasn't surrendering without a fight. 3 days after the fake police incident, every homeowner received an emergency notice announcing another HOA meeting. The agenda listed a single item: presentation of conclusive evidence regarding the Blackwell residence's violations and legal action authorization. She was making one final desperate push, trying to rally the community against us before the criminal investigation became public knowledge. What Victoria didn't know was that we had anticipated this move. Amanda had arranged for Officer Tiffany Wells to attend in an official capacity to address the impersonation incident. Mark Reynolds would be there to document everything for his investigation, and we'd confirmed that FBI agent Mitchell, who specialized in public corruption cases, would also attend after uncovering concerning ties between council member Matthews and other development projects with similar harassment patterns. The night before the meeting, Amanda and I sat on our back porch, looking up at the massive oak tree that had become the unlikely centerpiece of this suburban war. Its branches stretched protectively over our yard, just as they had for over a century before we moved in. "Do you regret buying this house?" I asked Amanda, as we sipped our coffee in the quiet evening air. She thought seriously for a moment before answering. "No," she said at last. "In the military, we're taught that the things most worth protecting rarely come without a fight. This home, this tree, what they represent for Tyler's future, they're worth defending." She reached over and took my hand. "Besides, Victoria picked the wrong enemies. We've faced worse than a power-hungry HOA president and her rent-a-cop sidekick." As we prepared our final strategy late into the night, we received an unexpected call from Tiffany. You need to know something before tomorrow's meeting, she said, her voice urgent. Victoria filed an actual court order today, a legitimate one, this time. She used the same fraudulent arborist report claiming your oak tree is hazardous. The judge who signed it wasn't aware of the ongoing investigation or the document fraud allegations. Technically, it's valid until challenged. In court, Victoria's final play was both desperate and cunning, using the legitimate legal system to accomplish what her criminal scheme had failed to do. She's trying to create legal cover for what Walter did, Amanda realized. If there's a valid court order, they can argue the fake officers were just a misunderstanding, not an intentional criminal act. We spent the next hour on the phone with Daniel, developing a counter-strategy. The upcoming HOA meeting was no longer just about clearing our names. It had become our single opportunity to expose the entire conspiracy before Victoria could cement her false narrative. The clubhouse was packed beyond capacity for the emergency meeting. Word of the fake police had spread like wildfire through the neighborhood, igniting curiosity, concern, and anger. Victoria sat at the center of the board table, composed and commanding as ever, with Ryan Harrison beside her, flipping through legal documents. Walter's seat remained conspicuously empty. He had reportedly called in sick, unwilling to face the community after police had searched his home. I noticed several unfamiliar faces scattered throughout the audience, including a stern-looking man in a tailored Navy suit. Later I would learn his name, Agent Mitchell, FBI. Victoria called the meeting to order with calculated grace, acknowledging the unusually large turnout with a polite smile. We're here to address ongoing serious violations at the Blackwell property and to authorize final legal action, she began smoothly. Despite numerous notices and opportunities to comply, these homeowners have consistently defied community standards, culminating in their dangerous refusal to remove a hazardous tree that threatens surrounding homes. Ryan Harrison stood to distribute packets to the board. As you can see, he announced, projecting the document onto the wall, we now have a court-ordered inspection and potential removal authorization for the oak tree in question. A county judge has reviewed the evidence and found merit in our safety concerns. Furthermore, he continued with a sharp look in our direction, any attempts to obstruct this legal order will result in contempt charges. Victoria's smile grew smug. There have been some unfortunate misunderstandings regarding enforcement procedures, she added. The board regrets any confusion, but wants to emphasize that all actions have been taken in the community's best interest and within legal boundaries. Now, we'll proceed with the vote to allocate funds for enforcement of the court order and legal fees. It was the moment we had prepared for. I stood. Before any vote occurs, the community deserves to hear the full story, I said, calm but unwavering. What Victoria calls unfortunate misunderstandings were, in fact, felony crimes, the impersonation of law enforcement officers, the use of fraudulent documents, all orchestrated by board member Walter Brooks under Victoria's direction. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as Officer Tiffany Wells stepped forward in full uniform. I'm Officer Tiffany Wells with the County Sheriff's Department, she announced. 2 individuals were arrested at the Blackwell residence for impersonating police officers and presenting fraudulent court documents. Both provided sworn statements identifying Walter Brooks as the person who hired them to intimidate the Blackwells and force access to their property. She detailed the ongoing investigation, confirming Walter was under suspicion for multiple felonies. Victoria's face turned pale, but only for a moment. Then she doubled down. This is absurd, she snapped. Walter may have exercised poor judgment in hiring private security, but to suggest criminal intent or board involvement is ridiculous. We now have a legitimate court order, which proves our safety concerns were valid all along. Amanda stepped forward. Her naval security credentials were pinned to her blazer like a badge of war. That court order, she said clearly, was obtained using the same fraudulent arborist report we disproved at the previous meeting. She projected the documents side by side on the screen. Martin Consulting, the alleged author of this report, ceased operations 18 months ago. We've confirmed through the state licensing board that no legitimate arborist inspected our tree. Then, she turned directly to the homeowners. But this is no longer just about a tree. With practiced precision, Amanda and I laid out the full conspiracy. Victoria's financial ties to Pinnacle Development, the pattern of harassment against homeowners who resisted, and the misuse of HOA funds to finance these operations. Daniel's documentation, Mark's investigative records, everything was presented. Mark Reynolds rose to speak next. My newspaper will be publishing a front-page exposé tomorrow, he said, complete with financial records and sworn statements from past victims, including Melissa Parker. The mood in the room shifted. Anger replaced silence. A few residents stood up to share their own experiences: selective enforcement, veiled threats, unexplained fines. Nancy Sullivan, trembling but resolute, stood from her seat. Victoria told me to falsify financial records and meeting minutes, she admitted tearfully. I was afraid of losing my job, but I won't lie for her anymore. Victoria's facade cracked. Her voice rose in fury. These are malicious fabrications. This military family moved in and immediately started causing problems, refusing to follow simple rules. Now they're spinning some wild conspiracy theory over one dangerous tree. But then came the final blow. Councilmember Matthews had quietly slipped into the back of the room. He now stepped forward. I want to clarify that my involvement with Pinnacle Development has always been properly disclosed and entirely above board, he said nervously, clearly trying to protect himself. Any suggestion that zoning decisions were influenced by improper considerations is categorically false. FBI agent Mitchell stood. Councilman, he said politely but firmly, I think we should continue this conversation downtown. We have some questions regarding certain financial transactions between your office and Pinnacle subsidiaries. Matthews blanched. His career was over, and he knew it. Then Eleanor Turner, supported by a walker and flanked by longtime residents, stepped forward. She held up an old folder of community documents. The original HOA covenant and historical records, she announced. This tree is a designated heritage oak, protected since the neighborhood was founded. Victoria knew this. I showed her the covenant when she started harassing the Parkers. She chose to ignore it, for profit. Victoria's eyes darted wildly. Her authority crumbled. As board president, I am adjourning this meeting immediately, she shouted, gathering her papers. These allegations will be addressed through proper legal channels, not in this kangaroo court. But Daniel Foster stood. Point of order, he said with authority. HOA bylaws allow for emergency removal of board members when evidence of malfeasance is presented. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in President Hamilton and temporary suspension pending full investigation. Multiple homeowners seconded the motion instantly. Despite Victoria's protests, the vote proceeded. To 3, overwhelming. Victoria was removed from power. Officer Wells escorted her from the clubhouse for questioning. The crowd broke into applause. Daniel was elected interim president by unanimous consent, with a mandate to conduct a full audit of HOA finances. Ryan Harrison quietly slipped away, in the confusion, distancing himself from his now disgraced client. The FBI took Councilman Matthews aside for a formal interview. Mark Reynolds collected his final statements for the article that would run the next day. In the aftermath, our oak tree was officially declared a protected heritage tree by